Okay, so I'm going to work on your scaffolded free response questions with you. And you're going to notice that there's 3 different ones. You won't get all 3 of these today. But there's one on cellular respiration, one on transpiration, and one on photosynthesis. So we'll do the one on cellular respiration together because we're done with that content. And you would have to kind of review to go back on transpiration because that has to do with properties of water. That's a little farther back. And then you're not completely through with the notes on photosynthesis yet. So we're going to start here. So the way these work is in this first box, that's the entire question. So there's these 3, and you'll get one of these 3 on the test. So just randomly, whatever Excel builds out for your random number, and whatever I've assigned to these as a number, you'll end up with one of the 3. But you will have already worked through them all first. And the reason that they're called scaffolded is that we break out each part and then we ask questions so that you understand the process of getting to this answer and what they want. So sorry for the out of the shower hair. Our world's been a little crazy. Okay, so we're going to start up here and we're just going to read. And don't skip the reading. I always want to. Like I want to skip down here and start doing stuff. But don't do that. So an agricultural biologist, hey, that'd be Ben, was evaluating 2 newly developed varieties of wheat as potential crops. So I want to keep in my head what organisms the question is focusing on. In an experiment, seedlings were germinated on moist paper towels at 20 degrees Celsius for 48 hours. Oxygen consumption, so right here, this is the part you need to understand. This is not given to you. The second that you read oxygen consumption, that is what you need to do. This needs to immediately be circled, and you need to think, hey, are we talking cellular respiration here? Because always in cellular respiration, you're going to consume oxygen. And so that's a very easy thing in the lab to measure. So they wouldn't have given you this heads up. So oxygen consumption of the 2-day-old seedlings was measured at different temperatures. So they're going to measure, this is related to metabolism, which equals growth, right? So different temperatures. The data are shown in the graph below. Okay? So the ones that are squares are this first variety. So I do this. I come over here and I'm going to see what's going on. So variety A at 7 degrees has the lowest slope. I come over and I write it. You do whatever you want to do. But I've learned that going back up here and checking, I make really stupid mistakes. Then as we go up, our next highest rate, which is slope, let's write that over here. Rate is slope. Is still variety A, but at a warmer temperature. So this is variety A at 17 degrees. Then you have your variety B at 7 degrees, and then variety B, and it's at 17 degrees. So in my head, I'm noticing just some things. Whenever they give you a graph, they're going to want you to talk about the patterns and the trends in the graph. Okay? So the first thing they have you do, though, is interesting. they want you to calculate the rate. I'm going to mark through that and put slope of oxygen consumption. Well, that's the title of the graph. I don't have to wonder if I'm doing the right thing. And it's in the units that they gave, milliliters per minute. So that tells you again, if it's milliliters per minute, which is y over x, that's just another confirmation for you to go, okay, I know what I'm doing. For each variety of wheat at both temperatures, show your work, including your setup and your calculation. Okay, I don't know what else to tell you except when they say that, that is absolutely essential. So every one of the bold terms is a point. So calculate means you're going to actually need to get the correct slope. Here you're going to show your work, and what they're really wanting when they say show your work is they want to know that you understand that change in y over change in x is slope. That's why they're wanting for you to show your work, including the setup and the calculation. Okay, so that's the first part. Let's just go down here and start that part, because it's broken out down here. So here it is again. We know we're going to do slope. They want us to show our work. Let's see what questions we're being asked. What's the formula for calculating the rate of a reaction? Well, in this case, our reaction has been graphed in a linear trend on the graph. So it's going to be slope. So rate would be change in y over change in x. Okay? And you need to show you know that. Like that needs to be something sorry, that you write. What is the amount of oxygen consumed by all varieties of wheat at time 0? That is like the nicest little hint ever. Ever. What the attention is being drawn to is, do all of these lines have the data point 0, 0? Yes. Use it. Use it. So the whole point of this, thank you, I love you, is use 0, 0 for slope for all four. That's all that's saying. At time 0, there was absolutely no consumption. What is the amount of oxygen consumed by variety A yeast at 7 degrees after 80 minutes? So now this is again a question telling you, if you're going to do slope, do extremes. First of all, be sure that you find a point that you feel comfortable with as far as what the numbers are. So, one thing I've noticed, we've given this question before, is, and I don't know why it happens, because you know I've taught math as long as I've taught science, and I've never figured this out. Students write the points backwards. They write the y first. They do crazy stuff. So in this particular case, after 80 minutes, 80 is the x, right? So your point would be 80, and then your y value for variety A is going to be somewhere, it looks like halfway between 0 and 1. So it would be 0.5 is what I would use for my point. Thus, the rate of oxygen consumption would be, and they want you to find the slope using 0, 0 and 80.5, showing your work. So I'm going to show you, we're going to go on the back, and we're going to do our work. So this is where we're going to do part A, and we're going to do rate. And this is time consuming. They know that. That's part of it. So you have to tell what variety A, this is at 7 degrees Celsius. You're going to use these 2 data points. And then we're going to calculate the slope for that. So you want to show the equation of what you're going to do. I mean, think about it. You know what you have to do in math. You know what the expectations are. You don't just jump over here and start doing some subtracting, you know, as far as what goes over what. You actually show that you're going to do change in y over change in x, and go ahead and show what your points are. So you're going to have, it's always the easiest if you can subtract 0. That's a wonderful thing. So you're going to have 0.5 minus 0 over 80 minus 0, right? Now, this is super weird. You're going to want to put this in your calculator, and you're going to want to get some decimal, some kind of I don't know how to describe it. Hold on. I'll have better words in just a second. Okay, so here's what I'm trying to say. You don't have to pick the extremes for your points. You don't. You should, but you don't have to. So because you don't have to, what I was trying to say was, these could be 2 different points, which means you would have 2 different, you couldn't take this and leave it like this, is what I'm trying to say. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go ahead and get this in, and don't go crazy with sig figs. Just don't. I don't know why that their answer they took to 4. I have no idea. I would have not done that. And I'm sure that it's not going to cost you a point. But it's weird. So in this particular case, now since we have these, the origin is one of our points, it's just 0.5 divided by 80. So I'm going to carefully not mess up my zeros. And they say in the rubric that the units are implied, but that's a first. Like, it literally is. And the reason they say that is because they asked you to write it in mil per min. That's where that's coming from. I would still put my units. So I done what they asked me to. I calculated. Okay, calculate means I did the math. Like I ended up, slope. I ended up with an answer mathematically. Yes, I did. I showed you how I got it. Yes, I did. I showed you my 2 points. I showed you the setup as far as that I know that rate is slope. And I actually put units. So I'm supposed to do that for every single one. So on down through here, they're walking you through just what are you going to be for your points? What are you going to use? So here, they're continuing this. Therefore, thus, the rate of oxygen consumption would be, show your work. So this is on the back. And this would be expressed in what units? Well, they told me it's in milliliters per minute. What is the amount? Then they're moving to the next one. So each one of these you would then continue until you were through with all 4. Okay? I'm not doing that math with you. So A is all about, can you read a graph? Can you pick points from a graph? Can you use that data to get some secondary form of information, in this case rate, and that you've calculated it? Okay? So that's A. So B is explain. Let's be really clear what explain is. Explain has two parts. So it's why does it matter? Like, what are we talking about? And why does it matter? So explain the relationship between. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to give this relationship and then say why it matters. Okay? So you're going to state it and then why it matters. We did this. Is it in this one? Well, we've got all of the, when we did the one with the phospholipids. I think it's in the other one. I think it's in this one. You know what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for where we used the what? Pink and the green and the yellow and the... There. This. So right here we did this too. So we did the whole describe is to create like a mental image so you can see it in your head. And then explain is tell what it is and tell why it's important. So what is the relationship between metabolism and oxygen consumption? So you're going to have to think about what metabolism is. So if you really, let's see what we can do as far as, let me see here. And then that is not getting any better, so I can't help it. I'm so sorry. So metabolism, and you want to be sure that you clarify that for biology. Okay, I was going to say it was the sum of all the chemical reactions. Well, I'm fine with that. So, let's see if we got something else. Not the same thing. Require it. I like this one. I tend to go to this one a lot, this lumen. Okay, so in this particular case, we're going to write, which I'll write it and we'll come back. So metabolism is and I don't have to write this. I can abbreviate because later you're going to have to create the whole thing. So combination of chemical reactions and it's that release and require, I guess we could put there, that release, require energy. So if we go back here, this is what I wrote, that metabolism is a combination of the chemical reactions. Really, it's in the body and the cells, and it's going to be about having energy. So where does the energy that what I used to call my grandmother's walking around money, the spending money of the cell, come from? So we're going to put here, which is ATP. That's going to be what they're getting at. This is going to be the way that metabolism is managed, is through energy management, which is through ATP management. So ATP is created I'm just going to put in large, which just means in the largest relative manner by the electron transport, I'm not going to do that, by oxidative, because we know these words, I don't have to do that, phosphorylation through the electron transport with oxygen consumed as the final electron acceptor. Okay? So they're wanting you to understand metabolism is energy management in the cell. It's managing all the reactions. Some reactions require and some reactions release energy, and we manage that through the currency of ATP. ATP is created by far predominantly through oxidative phosphorylation in, we could come on here now and say, cellular respiration, and that's going to be directly through the electron transport chain, where the oxygen is consumed because it's the final electron acceptor. Okay. Cite specific evidence from the graph. So let's go back up here. What's the relationship between? We basically were here. Discuss the effect of temperature on metabolism for each variety of seedlings. Do not go off the rails here. Always remember what we said. If they give you a graph, part A is, hey silly, do you know what that is? That's a graph. Can you read it? Can you read it? Good. Okay. Yay. All right. Let's look at B. B is, can you do something with it? Like, can you apply what you know from the information you got? So here's what we have. The relationship between metabolism and oxygen consumption. So the one thing we did not do, because it hasn't been asked to me yet, I'm wondering, yes. Okay, we'll get to it. The effect of temperature on metabolism for each variety of the seedlings. So right through here, this is where they want this kind of thing. The more the more, the more the less the more. They're wanting you to state as temperature increases, metabolism as measured by oxygen consumption, whatever. So let's look at that. Let's see what we can say. Cite specific evidence from the graph. Don't just talk out of your head. They gave you a graph. They want you to use only evidence from that graph to support the claim you made in the previous question. So we haven't made one yet. The first thing we did is we stated the relationship. So here's what I can say from the graph. For both variety A and variety B, here's the slope, right? That tells me that's the rate. The oxygen consumption, the rate, which is of metabolism, is higher at 17 degrees than at 7 degrees. So A is higher at 17 than at 7. B is higher at 17 than at 7. Okay, so that's what I'm going to say. Oxygen consumption is higher at 17 degrees than 7 degrees. Okay, that's one thing I know. The other thing I notice is B has a higher oxygen consumption rate than A, period. Like, it's higher. Even B's 7 degrees is higher than A. So I'm going to say variety B has higher oxygen consumption. Where'd it go? At both 7 and 17 than either variety A at either temperature. I have to think how I want to say that, but that's what I want to say. B has a higher rate of consumption. Compare and contrast A and B, we did that. I don't know what they're wanting there. So I guess what I could say here is B is higher than A at 7. B is higher than A at 17. B is higher than A at both. How about just period? Regardless of temperature. How about that? So here we go. Now we're getting into this stuff. Discuss the relationship. Anytime they say that, they want proportion. Always. Of metabolism, oxygen consumption, and temperature. Here's what people do. They give credit and they do things in the wrong order. Okay? As temperature increases, metabolism increases. The converse is not true. You cannot state as metabolism increases, temperature increases. That is not. Okay, so I'm going to put as temperature increases, you'll have an increase in metabolic rate, which means that you'll have an increase in oxygen consumption, because that's the way that you're measuring the energy requirements that come from metabolic rate. Cite specific evidence from the graph to support your claims. So now I'm going to say who has the highest metabolic rate. So for variety A, right, let's think about that, how I want to say that. I want to just say variety B has a higher metabolic rate than A, period. But this is where they're going with this here. Because this is oxygen consumption. And here this is metabolic rate. So B is higher than A at 7 for metabolic rate as measured by oxygen consumption. B is higher, has a faster metabolic rate than A at 17 degrees, and then B is higher than A regardless of temperature. So yes, I'm saying the same things. This is what I actually measured. This is what this is what I'm actually using that data to prove, which is that the more oxygen, the higher the metabolic rate. Okay. Explain the effects of temperature on oxygen consumption. Okay, you got to be careful here. So if you have an increase in temperature, you're going to have an increase in kinetic energy, right? And that will, within a certain limit, allow enzymes to work faster. So enzymes will increase the rate, their enzyme rate, up to Vmax. Remember how this works. It looks like this. So if we're over here, let's say maybe it's 7, I'm just making this up, and maybe over here we're at 17, increase in temperature, we did get an increase in rate. But if we kept on going, like if instead of 17 you went over to like 22, 25, you might turn around and have a decrease. So it's only going to go up to Vmax, which is your maximum rate. Because enzymes are energy dependent, which is based on temperature, which is the measure of energy. Okay? So this particular part right here with the increase in temperature, you have an increase in your enzymes. So therefore, you have an increase in the processes of metabolism. So metabolic rate increases. When metabolic rate increases, oxygen consumption increases. Okay? I don't know where it stopped. So I'm going to go back here. That's so frustrating for me. So this is the setup. It's always this way. If they give you a graph or some big old piece of data, part A is, do you know what this is? Yes. Can you read it? Can you do something with this part? Like, do you see the more? In this case, you have lines, so it's going to be slope. Okay. Can you do something with that? That's A. B is, look at the relationships in here. Can you interpret the information? That's different than just doing some simple math. So, I don't know, 7th, 8th graders could do the math of slope for this, but they would not understand what this is actually giving you the information about, which is B. Then part C is, let's do something that's different. Like, let's apply this to a different situation. So now we're going to do another experiment. Variety A, both temperatures, we're going to treat them with a chemical that keeps NADH from being oxidized back to NAD. Ooh, no electrons can come off the bus. Predict, okay, there we go. Don't hedge. Well, I think maybe possibly, no, I predict that, period. What's the most likely effect of that chemical on metabolism and oxygen consumption? If you do not put those two parts in your answer, you will not get credit for your points. Okay, and then say why. So here we go. Predict the effect of the seedling's metabolism, oxygen consumption, if it's treated with a chemical. Okay, so we haven't done it yet. I'm talking you through my thoughts. So the problem is the electrons that were generated, you go and you look up in your notes, where do we actually create NADH? Okay, so you can say in cellular respiration, but I want the exact spots. Those electrons are carried by NADH. They cannot be taken, I decided I liked provided, to the electron transport chain. So the electron transport chain is not functional. It's shut down. That doesn't have any electrons to work on. So at that point, would you be, let's go back up here and see what they said. What's going to be the effect? Well, the direct effect of that means if it's not working, it's not consuming oxygen. So therefore, don't say less or possibly or some. None. No oxygen. If this electron transport chain shuts down, no oxygen is consumed. So metabolism drops / decreases. Okay? And then really the explain your prediction comes here. Also, you want to be truthful? If you are not able to regenerate NAD, these places where I'm telling you to go back and look up, those processes shut down too. So also, because NAD is required by the processes, you go find them, then they shut down too. Now that actually does not have to do with oxygen consumption, but it just says, I understand that everything shuts down. Provide scientific reasoning to explain your claim. How would this impact the 3 primary stages of cellular respiration? Here we go. We already said So you can just come right up here, and you don't have to. They don't even have pyruvate oxidation in here. So glycolysis does not need oxygen. But, so the oxygen, it doesn't need it. But it does need NAD. So it's going to be not functional. Krebs also. Krebs only works in the presence of oxygen just because it's in the matrix, which means that pyruvate was able to go through the gated transport protein. But Krebs needs NAD+. So Krebs, not functional. Electron transport chain, we already said. Right there. How would this impact the production of ATP? You would have a decrease. You don't have to go crazy. And don't say things like you'll never make it again, but you would have a decrease in ATP. Because you would not be making ATP through, because you would not make ATP through oxidative, that's okay, phosphorylation, goodness, I don't want to write that whole thing, in the electron transport chain. How would this impact the role oxygen plays in cellular respiration? Well, it's needed when the electron transport chain is working. So it's not needed in cellular respiration. They're being pretty specific there. Okay, so it's not needed as the final electron acceptor for the electron transport chain because the electron transport chain is not functional. You're going to repeat yourself a lot due to NADH not being oxidized, which just means I'm going to drop my electrons off to NAD. Okay? That's it. And then here it says take all this mess, write it correctly. So I will put these two videos together because my computer, as always, decided to just stop. And it is very likely that this is what you'll see during class at the first of the week. Because I just use my nebulizer. This is about as good as it gets as far as not constant croupy coughing. So this is my backup plan. But this is what we'll do for all of these. So I will walk you through all of them. Okay? And if you have any questions, then we'll go through them before you take your test. But you should be able to finish your math, and then you'll put this on. So you're going to turn this in at the end of the period. So end of the block on either Monday or Tuesday, whichever is your day. And that means that you have written the whole thing. Now, the one thing that you don't have to do, I'm going to put a big thing right here, except do not redo the calculation in Part A. Don't waste your time copying this from back here over onto another piece of paper. But you'll put this on just your paper, and then you're going to just staple it. And that stapler is on my little glass rolly cart right there. So staple it to the back of this paper. Okay? So you should be fine and able to do it. Okay. You're the best. I will see you tomorrow, but just probably not where I'm trying to do this without copying.